Hello friends, and welcome back to Mothership. Today I have 2 racks of beef ribs. I have one that I did with a wet brine and one that I did with a dry brine. We're gonna find out which is better. Let's get started. Now I have here 2 racks of beef ribs. So let's get them out of their cryovac. Now one of these will be my control and the other will be our test subject. Both look pretty good. Not a ton of hard fat. Not a ton of meat either, unfortunately. A little bit of fat right here I'm going to pull. Now just based on size, and then I'm going to wet brine it in a pan. I think I'm going to take off the bottom rib here. And this will be my wet brine candidate. So the wet brine, pretty simple guys. Just going to put them in meat side down. And then I'm going to go with my standard wet brine, which is just a cup of water to 1 tablespoon of kosher salt. And then add more or less depending on how much you need. That's completely covered the meat side. This should be good. I'm going to throw this in the fridge and we're going to wet brine it for between 2 to 5 hours, something like that. I'm not going to go overnight because I really don't want to turn this into, like ham. But I want to get enough salt into the meat. So 2 to 3 hours is probably the point. It's in the morning now. I'm going to be cooking these probably around noon. So it's 9 o'clock right now. This will give it about 3 hours before it goes onto the smoker. And I think that should be sufficient. Now for our control group here, which is just our standard ribs, I'm going to go with my usual. I'm going to just score the backside a little bit. I don't ever take the membrane off of beef ribs. It usually kind of just burns away. It's not necessary. When I pull the other rack out, I'll probably do the same thing. Just score it down. And this little piece I pulled, this will be my little snack. You know my drill, teaspoon of kosher salt per pound of meat. Since this is about half bone, you can probably do about half that, so maybe a 1/4 teaspoon per pound of these beef ribs. Get it all nice and salted down. Perfect. Now I'm gonna throw these onto a wire rack and into the fridge until I'm ready to give them a dry rub. Our brine session is done, so it's time to get a rub on these. Before I start this, I just got my smoker up to temp at 225, which is where I'm going to smoke these. So now I'm just going to give them a nice rub down of my crop circle honey barbecue rub. As always, I will have the instructions to make it down below. Get everything nice and rubbed down. I'm not using a binder here. As you can see, there's still a little bit of moisture on these, so I think they'll be fine. Just get everything coated down. We don't need to focus as much on the bone side for obvious reasons. Focus more on the meat side. Perfect. Now these are my control ribs, so I'm going to get the wet brine ones out and we will take care of those. Now just like with most wet brining, we want to get them out, give them a thorough rinse down, and then pat them dry. Since there's still some moisture on here, obviously, even after patting them, I don't think we need a binder for these either. But same process, just going to coat it down with the exact same rub. Now I'm going to throw these directly onto the smoker and we're going to ignore them for a couple hours to get some bark built and then we'll come back and reassess. Alright, we're about an hour in. I figured I'd show you guys the setup. So we have our control and our wet brine. Neither of them have their bark set. I would say probably the dry brine is a little further along than the wet. But I'm just going to let them keep running, like I said, for another couple hours to get the bark nice and set and they'll probably begin spritzing down. About 3 hours in, our bark is set. I actually already gave them 1 spritz because they were looking a little dry, but this is the point where I'm going to continue to spritz them. You can see there's a little bit of pooling here, which isn't great, but they could use some spritzing. Now these are cooking a lot faster than my expectation. We are in the 190s, in some spots I'm saying 200, so these are actually getting right up there. Honestly, just like every other piece of beef, you can take them, you can put them wrapped up into a cooler or a hot oven. See, this spot right here is about 186, and then up front here we're looking at 190, almost 200 degrees. So they need a little bit more time, but they're getting close, which is surprising because they've only been on for about 3 hours. This is probably going to be a 4 to 5 hour cook, max. I'm going to keep spritzing them just to keep them moist so they don't dry out too much, but I want some more pull apart. Yeah, as far as differences, can't really see too much, but I'm interested to see how they actually turn out. We're actually almost perfectly at the 5 hour mark, and guys, these are looking perfect. really good feel to them. Everything's going in like butter. Temperature's about 200 degrees. Tons of pullback. These are ready to come off. Let's take them off the smoker and let's see how we did. Now, as you guys could tell, I cooked these basically the exact same way, except for one was wet brined and one was dry brined. Now, as far as the product, looking at them, they both have a really nice smoke ring, which I'm not sure you can see here. They both look really good. They both smell really good. They have the same amount of dry rub on them. So the only difference here is going to be that one was in water and one was dry. Both of them actually have a really nice bark. I was a little concerned about the wet brine for a while, just because of that extra moisture on there. But you know what? I left it on the smoker to about the stall. And then when I bumped up the temperature and started spritzing, everything set very nicely. So the wet brine was great with producing the same amount of bark that the dry brine did. So you know what? Let's give them a taste test and see if there's any difference. I will start with, actually I'll start with the control. We'll start with the dry brine. That's a great beef rib. This is one of my favorites, guys. Can't go wrong with this flavor. And now we'll do the exact same thing. Bottom side of the ribs with the one that we did a wet brine. Now I'll be honest with you guys. If you took a gun to my head right now and asked me which one was which and which one was better, I couldn't tell you. They taste so similar that there really isn't much of a difference. They both have a good flavor to them. They both are nice and moist. And I attribute that to the fact that we put salt on the dry brine side first, let it absorb into the meat. And on the wet brine, obviously, we let the salt water go into the meat. Neither of them are super sloppy. Neither of them are super dry. They're both really good. So if you were to ask me which I would do in the future, I'd probably keep doing dry brine because it's a hell of a lot easier. The wet brine, though, does produce good meat. Now, if I used a much thicker cut of meat, would I get more moisture in there that would cause an issue? Potentially. I don't know. But on these ribs, I honestly can't tell the difference in flavor or in consistency or texture of the meat. But on the wet brine, you could use different types of liquids. So instead of using water, we could do like cider, Coke, whatever you want to do. So you could get different flavors on there. But I still think it's much easier to just run with the dry brine using our regular salt, then rub afterwards. Well, now you've heard my thoughts, guys, and I'd love to hear yours down below. Do you ever use a wet brine on any of your beef or pork ribs? I pretty much only use dry brine. I've never really actually experimented with wet brine, and I can't see the reason why I'd use it versus the dry. It's just a heck of a lot easier for the dry. But if you guys have a reason why, please let me know down below, and let me know what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear from somebody who is a big fan of the wet brine. As always, guys, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. Really helps the channel, makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside knowing that I'm doing something that's not getting completely forgotten about by the YouTube algorithm. And most importantly, guys, cook something fantastic, and I will see you on the next cook. Bye-bye.